And welcome to Ascending Order with me, Basil Valentine, for another day in, well, a rapidly changing world, isn't it? And not always for the better. Donald Trump arriving in Britain today for his second state visit. And apparently he's going to get his golden carriage ride, but in private. What a bizarre and vain idea that is. I mean, how absolutely ludicrous have we got as a country where we are giving gilded carriage rides to overgrown children like Trump? What a disappointment he has been as a US president. Nothing short of a disaster, really. Promised to do so much, promised to end the war in Ukraine within hours of being elected. And here we are 9 months into his presidency, and the situation there is worse than ever. He briefly managed to get a ceasefire in Gaza midway through the genocide, but of course the Israelis ripped that up so that they could carry on killing everyone. We'll be having a look at the latest UN agency report, which, along with all the other humanitarian organizations and international NGOs, says, yes, Israel is committing genocide. It's pretty clear now. And how about the evidence of your own eyes and ears as well, to all you genocide deniers out there? The place has been completely and utterly eviscerated. Just today, Israel, after heavy bombardments overnight, once again, murdering dozens more innocent women and children, has now begun a major ground offensive in Gaza City. Very interesting to see what happens to the last remaining Christians there. A conference is underway in Chicago. I'll draw attention to that a little bit later on, seeking to revise, shall we say, the opinion of Christian Americans and point out to them that modern day Israel is not the biblical Israel. So we'll have a look at that. And then in the second half of the program, I am delighted to say I'll be joined by my good friend and regular colleague, Nilssen. Europe, it seems, is preparing for war, including the United Kingdom. The hapless Starmer, let's hope we can get him out of office before then, wants to buy £50 billion worth of American fighter jets and equip them with nuclear weapons. He has said Britain needs to be on a war footing. So has that idiot so-called defense secretary of ours, John Healey. He too seems to want war with Russia. I'll be talking to Mats, who's based in Stockholm, Sweden, about what the perspective is from the Baltic up there. Belarus, intriguingly, has invited the United States to observe its latest war game maneuvers right under the noses of Kiev. So Mats always has his finger on the pulse. He's founded a new group in Stockholm called The Dissidents, a group of public intellectuals who are pushing back, too late, unfortunately, to stop Sweden from joining NATO, but at least initiating a national conversation there about the destiny of that formerly neutral country, now part of the war machine. But first, we're going to go to the great moral, political, geopolitical story of our time, which is, of course, the Gaza Holocaust. And I use the term advisedly. What is a Holocaust? A very large amount of destruction, especially by fire or heat, or the killing of very large numbers of people. Well, I think you'd have to agree that 680,000 dead qualifies as a very large number of people. I'm going to keep showing this slide because the figures quoted in the corporate media are little more than 10% of that. But this is based on all the data collected, and it was compiled by Dr. Gideon Polier and Professor Richard Hill, including in 380,000 infants under the age of 5. My goodness, this is worse than King Herod, isn't it? Really absolutely apocalyptic stuff. And of course, if you're in any doubt about the Holocaust, the genocide, then why not use your own eyes and ears? But first of all, let's hear from one of the key men at the United Nations, Chris Sidoti, and he was speaking at a press conference yesterday.
The most significant aspect of the interim orders of 26 January 2024 was that every country in the world was put on notice by the International Court of Justice that there was a plausible risk of genocide in Gaza. And if it had not happened before that, it certainly happened then, that every country in the world became obliged under the law to take action, not to speak fine words, to take action to prevent genocide. There can be no doubt whatsoever that that obligation was activated on the 24th of January 2024, if not before. And in response to your question, that applies as much to India as, Jamie, it applies to Germany and the United States, as it applies to my country and every other country.
Unfortunately, such is the moral turpitude of the world we live in at the moment, that the only organisations doing anything to prevent the genocide in the UK are Palestine Action, who now find themselves designated a terrorist organisation, and of course the Global Sud Flotilla, currently in the Mediterranean, heading towards Gaza to break the siege, to actually do something about the genocide. The dereliction of duty by the so-called international community is off the charts. Here's Chris Sidoti again, responding to a question at yesterday's press conference.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry today decried a distorted and false report and said that 3 individuals, so referring to the Commission of Inquiry, 3 individuals serving as Hamas proxies, notorious for their openly anti-Semitic positions. Could you please comment on that?
These reports should be taken seriously, but honestly, the Israeli responses are becoming so boring. You know, they say the same thing every time. They're producing the responses by ChatGPT these days, and they spend so much money in the Foreign Ministry on propaganda, you'd think that they would actually come up with something original. I would want them to engage with the evidence, but they never engage with the evidence. They put the report into ChatGPT, and then they put out the standard response. So no one takes it seriously, and Jamie, you shouldn't either.
Very good point. Here is that UN report. The UN's top investigative body on Palestine and Israel ruled today that Israel is guilty of the crime of genocide in Gaza in the most authoritative pronouncement to date. The 72-page report by the UN Commission of Inquiry on Palestine finds that that Israel has committed 4 of the 5 acts prohibited under the 1948 Genocide Convention, and that Israeli leaders had the intention to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a group. The finding echoes reports by Palestinian, Israeli, and international rights groups that have reached the same conclusion in the past year. But this is the first comprehensive legal probe by a UN body. Worth remembering, of course, that David Lammy produced that shameful, disgraceful, and I hope the authors are not just pilloried but prosecuted at some point in the future. That shameful UK government report that said not only was there no genocide, but that there was no risk of it either. Truly appalling, but indicative of the extent to which the UK state has been captured by Zionism. It carries on serving as an indicator of a judgment by the ICJ, which is currently hearing a case by South Africa accusing Israel of genocide. The ICJ case is expected to take several years to be concluded, by which time, of course, Gaza will doubtless have been ethnically cleansed, unless the so-called international community is prepared to actually raise a hand to do something about it. The Arab League, of course, concluded yesterday with just a few meaningless statements. For the finding on Israel's responsibility for its conduct in Gaza, the Commission used the legal standards set forth by the International Court of Justice. This is therefore the most authoritative finding emanating from the United Nations to date. And in case you were in any doubt, let's remind ourselves, unfortunately, it's an unpleasant duty, but we must, because the corporate media ignores it, of course, we must have a look at what's been going on in Gaza over the last 24 hours. Now, one of the key things, one of the key components of genocide, of course, is destroying not just people, not just mass murder, but also the means to survive, any possible structures, water, cleansing plants, food supplies, and of course buildings. Israel has been detonating in time-honored, shall we say, in the few days after 9/11, detonating the few remaining residential buildings in Gaza City. The aim, of course, is to prevent Gazans, Palestinians, from ever returning. If you've destroyed somebody's home and literally the whole strip is simply sand and rubble, then it becomes much easier to implement the Blair-Trump Gaza Riviera plan, which seems to be the direction of travel, with nothing but silence or the merest little sanctions from the likes of the European Union and the United Kingdom, while, of course, Washington remains firmly in Israel's pocket. We'll come on to that a little bit later in the program. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Max Blumenthal has been doing some great work uncovering the meeting in August organized by Bill Ackman, where Charlie Kirk was pressured into they tried to pressure him into accepting a $150 million bribe from Bibi Netanyahu. He refused. The rest is history, as they say. But I'm afraid to say we've got to sit through a few more images from Gaza. As I say, this Holocaust, where we can't say we didn't know what was going on when our children and grandchildren ask us what we did during the Gaza Holocaust. This isn't like the 1940s anymore. It's all very visible. That's enough of that, to be honest. It's Israeli soldiers having one of their trance dance parties while committing genocide, destroying what remains of Gaza City there. And according to them, it's all one big joke, isn't it? Here are some more of the homicidal maniacs signing up to go and kill more children and steal Palestinian land. Here are some proto-Israelis leaving to join the slaughter.
These two are moving from St. Louis and Los Angeles and plan on enlisting in the IDF. Given the danger, we're told not to use their names. But at just 18 and 20 years old, they say they're ready for the deadly task of defeating Hamas.
It feels right, home is home, and I think it feels the most right for me personally to come give back and be here. That's where I feel closest to my family and to myself, so.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I just feel like it's the right thing for me right now, and I feel very connected to Israel, and it's the place I want to be.
Yeah, the danger, there's a war going on here.
It makes me want to do it more.
This is the 65th charter flight for Nefesh B'Nefesh, the organization that partners with Israel's Ministry of Aliyah and Integration.
This is our 65th flight, and it's over 90,000 people have moved to Israel from around the world, but mostly from the United States.
This is the first charter flight since October 7. It also sets a new record. August saw more than 1,000 new immigrants, the highest total in more than 20 years.
We always wanted to, and we knew we were going to do it. And my dad kept saying that, what are we doing in America? We should be in Israel right now.
Yep, let's go to Palestine and kill more children, shall we? Let's, as one Israeli minister said, let's find ways more painful than death to inflict on the Palestinians, and they seem to be achieving their objective.
عمو الحمد لله على سلامتك يا عمو. وين كنت موجودة ساعة الضربة؟ ايش حسيت ساعتها؟ ليش الدمعة بعيونك يا عم؟
حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. يعني وين العالم؟ وين العالم من غزة؟ يعني الأمة العربية الإسلامية مجتمعة، أين هي من غزة؟ وين العالم؟ اللي بيطالب بحقوق الإنسان، أين أنتم؟ أي غزة؟ بيوت تدمر، ناس نازحين في خيامها، دمرت كل خيامنا، الآن لا مأوى لنا إلا الله سبحانه وتعالى، لا مأوى لنا، لا غطاء لنا، يعني أطفالنا تبكي من هذا القصف الشديد وهذا الدمار الشديد الذي حولنا اليوم. الآن نحن لا مأوى لنا.
As we heard from Chris Sidoti, where is the world? States are obliged to prevent this kind of thing from happening, but they've done absolutely nothing. Here we go.
شو اسمك عمو؟ سلمى منظر مين؟
I appreciate these things are very difficult to watch, but let's remind ourselves 680,000 dead, 380,000 under 5 years of age. Even if those figures are an exaggeration, let's say it's only 300,000 dead. What say you, Keir Starmer? a man who has helped facilitate this, who has allowed Israeli bombers to refuel in the United Kingdom, who has flown surveillance flights over Gaza and shared the information with the IOF, with the occupation forces. Absolutely disgraceful. There's got to be a reckoning. People like Starmer must go to court. They must be held responsible for their actions, or we are truly in hell. Meanwhile, of course, over in the United States, tectonic plates are starting to shift following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Candace Owens and Max Blumenthal have been doing some noticing over the last couple of days, noticing in particular, as Max Blumenthal identified, that Charlie Kirk was under tremendous pressure from the Israel lobby not to stray off the reservation and to double down on his support for the genocidal monsters. Well, I think Charlie was, according to Candace Owens, undergoing some kind of spiritual awakening in the weeks and months before his death. He was an evangelical Christian, and of course, large swathes of the evangelical community have been captured by Zionism and the false equivalence between the historic Israel and the modern day state. Means that they are often vociferous in their support of genocide. Of course, we ask the question, what part of murdering 380,000 children would Jesus support? But so blinded are they by the brainwashing and propaganda that they don't allow themselves that kind of thought. Now, Kirk apparently was considering converting to Catholicism, which, for all its faults, does not have quite the same allegiance to Christian Zionism that some of these Protestant denominations do. Moreover, Kirk, of course, had Tucker Carlson speaking at his most recent event. Tucker, now derided as an anti-Semite for daring to ask questions about 9/11 and about Israel's genocide in Gaza. Likewise, Candace Owens, who was named Anti-Semite of the Year last year, believe it or not, for daring to question Israeli narratives. And it seems the latest is that Charlie was planning on inviting Marjorie Taylor Greene to Turning Point's big event in December. He had to be stopped from doing this. So he was offered a $150 million bribe by Benjamin Netanyahu to continue, double down on his support for the terrorist Zionist entity. That money he refused. Likewise, he refused to go to Israel again and humiliate himself with the usual propaganda tour. He was shot in the throat. Just a coincidence. Here's Max Blumenthal of the Grey Zone talking to Judge Andrew Napolitano yesterday about a meeting that took place in August on Long Island, where Kirk came under enormous pressure from Zionist influencers and the billionaire Bill Ackman to rein in his criticism of Israel and get back on the reservation.
Following my September 12th report, which provided background about the pressure, the mounting pressure that Charlie Kirk was under from pro-Israel forces, from Netanyahu's cutouts in the United States, I gathered more details. The piece, it hit like a sledgehammer. It really caused a lot of, I think it spoke for a lot of people, particularly within the conservative movement, which is changing among the youth on the question of Israel. And more people started coming out, and more people started talking, and people were talking to me. And these were people who had knowledge of a tumultuous, stormy meeting held in the Hamptons during the first week of August, convened, according to multiple sources, with knowledge of this meeting, intimate knowledge of this meeting, by the billionaire ultra-Zionist financier Bill Ackman, who's close to Netanyahu and his kind of network in the United States. Charlie Kirk was summoned along with an array of young, sort of vapid, very avaricious conservative influencers who seem to be sort of in Israel's back pocket to set a very pro-Israel tone for this meeting. And Charlie Kirk was, according to one source, hammered by Ackman and others for allowing Israel critics, very prominent conservative voices like Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, or the anti-Zionist Jewish comedian Dave Smith to appear at his events. And actually, Charlie Kirk was planning to host many of these same figures again in December, and he had just added to his TPUSA major, I think it's called America Fest in December, the premier critic of Israel in Congress. I didn't say Republican critic, I just said premier critic, because that's what she is now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, which really reflected his shifting views. And Ackman, according to multiple sources, had this meeting to basically bully Charlie Kirk into submission. Charlie Kirk walked away, according to one person, feeling like there was an attempt to blackmail him. He refused any offers of funding and also refused the offer to travel to Israel and meet with Netanyahu, which Netanyahu disclosed in the wake, the immediate wake of Netanyahu's death. He talked about this letter, but he didn't say whether Charlie Kirk refused or accepted. I've learned since that he refused.
Bullying, blackmail, rise and kill first. Secret history of Israel's targeted assassinations. Max goes on to say that he doesn't have any evidence, of course, that Israel was behind Kirk's assassination. But the circumstantial evidence is certainly there. And we have a ludicrous patsy presented, the lone nut gunman theory. Netanyahu, of course, went on television and started blaming Islamists within minutes of Kirk's assassination. He thinks he doth protest too much. George Galloway has been typically vociferous on this issue, and he had a good old go yesterday, as we can hear now.
Just stick to my own political lifespan. You, Israel, have been assassinating people all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, and further afield, all of my political lifetime. You assassinated almost half of the government of Yemen just 10 days ago. You don't get to say that it's anti-Semitic to suspect you might have had a hand in assassinating Charlie Kirk when you told us to marvel at your percipience and at your ingenuity, your engineering skills and your patience when you waited years to explode every pager in Lebanon, man, woman and child notwithstanding. You don't get to say how good you are at killing, but call it anti-Semitic if somebody suspects that you may have killed Charlie Kirk, especially when there are sundry reasons to suspect that you might. And they're multiplying by the hour. When you scrubbed or caused to be scrubbed from YouTube the entirety of the episode of Charlie Kirk, when he openly states that you stood down on October the 7th, that it was an inside job, that you were responsible for the events on October 7th. Where is it? Where is it, Mr. YouTube? Who told you to scrub that edition?
That alone, of course, would be enough to get Charlie killed. We'll talk in a moment about further efforts by the Israeli regime to clamp down on social media. But worth noting at this point that Donald Trump himself is apparently terrified of Netanyahu. Charlie Kirk called him a bully and a habitual liar. Well, we know that. He's a homicidal maniac. But on one of his recent visits to Washington, the Secret Service found bugs, found listening devices over emergency response vehicles that would be used to assist the president in the event of some kind of attack. That's the second time that the Secret Service have discovered bugs after a visit to the White House by Netanyahu and his retinue. And even Boris Johnson, an ardent Zionist, said that his security detail found a listening device in the toilet at number 10 Downing Street after, again, a visit by the mass murderer and child killer in chief, Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, they're all afraid of him. Here's Charlie in his own words explaining.
I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. But like some of the mess, and you've seen how I've been treated, Megan, by some, not all, by some.
No, it's very irritating.
It's
been
almost
so
as if
unfair.
you,
they were coming after you after a turning point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the fifth time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megan. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And I could go, you saw it, Megan. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me are in a hyper paranoid state because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white. And you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megan. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? Like, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online? How would I behave? So that's like my charitable kind of overcompensation spirit. At the same time, I'm like, but it's not defensible to be dumb, right?
But you have to be dumb when it comes to Israel. You have to ignore the evidence of your own eyes and ears. That's what governments all over the world have been doing over the last 18 months, allowing the genocide to proceed unobstructed. Now they want to clamp down on social media. Yair Golan is the leader of the so-called opposition Democratic Party in Israel, and he has been quite explicit about it. There's far too much exposure of what Israel is doing on social media through channels like this, and they don't like it, so they want to try and terminate it.
The next thing we will do, is to put restriction on the social media in a way that not allowed to make brutal propaganda in the social media. Because this is a worldwide problem. And it should be initiated by the United States of America, the place where all the big firms is settled. Facebook and X and all the rest. This is a major problem for democracy all over the globe. And we need to treat it seriously. We can do it.
There you go. The worldwide problem, of course, is that people are noticing that Israel is committing genocide. That's what he's talking about. Now, Europe, of course, seems to want to start another war with Russia. We've had Merz and the other European leaders, the likes of von der Leyen, continuing to spew out their homicidal rhetoric, wanting every last Ukrainian to sacrifice themselves for the cause of defeating Russia. Joining me now to discuss the latest machinations in and around the Baltic, Belarus, of course, inviting bizarrely the United States to observe its war games. Is joining me now is founder of the dissident group, the increasingly influential public intellectuals pushing back against the conventional narrative in Europe that World War III and a war with Russia is inevitable. I find it hard to believe at times I'm actually saying those words, but I am. Joining me now is Mats Nilssen. Mats, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure we are that influential, at least not on a European level. We do our best in our little pond up here in the north and in Sweden, but every word counts, and I think every dissident doing his or her job is a small needle pick towards the mainstream narratives.
Absolutely. That's what we try to do here on Unprecedented TV. First of all, by way of just educating our viewers and listeners, I just want to play a short clip from DW News in the first instance. This is about Belarus inviting the US to observe its military drills with Russia right under Kyiv's nose.
In a rare move, Belarus has invited U.S. military officials to observe joint military drills currently being staged with Russia. The Belarusian defense minister welcomed U.S. representatives to the Zapad exercises near Minsk on Monday. Representatives from 22 other countries, including NATO members Turkey and Hungary, were also observing the drills. The invitation comes amid rising tensions between Russia and NATO over Moscow's war in Ukraine and the recent downing of Russian drones over NATO airspace. Mark Hansen is a former colonel in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He's now a senior advisor with the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome back to DW, Mark. Now, why would the United States want to send observers to these exercises? Was this a symbolic visit or really a fact-finding mission?
It's both. Part of it is to reduce tensions. That was part of what Belarus wants to do. They see these tensions rising between NATO and Russia. They don't want to get caught in the middle. But observing exercises is also a reduction in tensions in the sense that these exercises won't turn into something different. One of the great concerns with large exercises is that they will be used as cover for a military operation, and customarily, historically, the U.S., NATO, Russia, and the Soviet Union have exchanged observers so that these concerns about whether this is a cover for an attack will be diminished.
Mm-hmm. Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, now that you mention the fears that this might turn into something else, have tightened border security in response to these drills. Now they're seeing their main ally is attending them. Is this a good or a bad sign for Washington's European allies?
Well, the fact that the United States has observer there is a very good thing, because we can see that all of these countries, including Ukraine, have been concerned that this might turn into something different. Of course, there are other countries there who are also observing. That also helps. That makes it a broader group of observers, so that if anything is out of line, you have more eyes on what's going on. But as I say, overall, this is a good sign. And also, Belarus has taken some steps additionally to reduce tensions. They moved the location of the exercise further to the east, away from the borders, and the size of the exercise is about half what was originally planned.
So it seems, Max, then that Belarus is doing what it can to scale back, to reduce tension, inviting observers from the West in. They're trying to say to the world, look, calm down, everybody. And it's NATO with these Romanian jets being mobilized that want to keep ramping up the pressure.
Well, more than likely so. I mean, there are a few different aspects to this. These U.S. observers. First of all, if I take the legal perspective, which I tend to do initially, is that there is a formal agreement. Belarus has to fulfill the obligations, or at least they have to live up to the spirit of the Vienna document under the OSCE, which mandates transparency for these kind of large-scale military exercises. So that's the formal part. Then, of course, it's transparency and trust. I mean, to independently verify that the exercise is defensive in nature and not a preparation for any real offensive, Belarus is thereby reducing the risk of miscalculation and escalation, especially in relation to the trigger-happy Polish and Baltic states that are right next door to Belarus. Thirdly, there is the aspect of deterrence. I mean, it's difficult to covertly use for Russia and Belarus to covertly use the exercise, trying to position themselves somewhere to later escalate towards a NATO country if you have NATO observers there. Like they said, there were Turkish, Hungarian, and American observers stationed there, and they moved the Zapad exercise, Zapad, which by the way means west. They moved the exercise towards the east, away from the border towards the NATO countries. And then, of course, fourthly, I think it's mutual intelligence gathering. All parties want to gather insights from their enemies or their frenemies, or whatever you should call these people these days. And any opportunity to interact is an opportunity to gather intelligence. So I think it's a confidence building measure in a region that's this northern part of Europe, this northern region, is marked by very high tensions these days, and of course a deep mutual distrust. These observers aren't going to change that, but at least it's a small step in the right direction.
Not just the Baltic where there's the tension. I'm reading this morning, bizarrely, that the Italian Defense Minister Guido Crosetto has said that Italy is not ready for a Russian attack as tensions between NATO and Russia continue to escalate. We're not ready for either a Russian attack or attack by another nation. I've been saying for a long time, but there's no danger of a Russian attack, is there? You're much closer to Russia in Sweden. Are there similar fears in Russia? Do you have a similarly paranoid government talking about imminent Russian attack there in Sweden, Mats?
Oh, yes. Oh, we most certainly do. I mean, Italy, if you look at when you do the Gallup polls within the European Union countries, it's always the countries, I would say the southern and southwestern countries, the Latin states within Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Austria, partly Ireland, of course, that are very skeptic towards any imminent threat from Russia. Now, the countries that are mostly worried about Russia are the countries that have historically been involved in conflict with either the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. Thereby, it's easy to invoke that historical feeling of fear. We have always, well, not always, but for a few hundred years, we have used Russia as a enemy, or we have pointed to Russia as a threat. And Russia was the last country that Sweden went to war with back in 1809. Previous to that, we of course were worst enemies with Denmark, and Denmark was the greatest threat to Sweden. And before that, it was those dastardly Catholics who was the greatest threat to Sweden. But right now, it's Russia, and Russia is a very good, shall I say, object to focus local problems on. So the Swedish government can basically blame Russia for most of the ills that ail Swedish society. I mean, if there's gang violence, the government can say, well, it's probably Russian covert operatives funding these gang members. So that's why they're attacking us, or that's why they're blowing things up. Oh, we don't have enough money for our schools. Well, that's because we have to send the money to the military industrial complex in Sweden in order to be able to fight off Russia. We're so sorry, but Russia is really, really a big threat. A very convenient enemy to have. And as history proves, this happens from time to time. And every time the citizens sadly fall into the trap. I wish we didn't, but right now in Sweden, we are very much stuck in the trap.
Now, there was a flashpoint earlier this week with the incursion of Russian drones into Polish and Romanian airspace, something that prompted Romania to scramble some jets. Let's just get up to date on that story, Mats, for our viewers.
NATO troops will be deployed to Poland following Vladimir Putin's second drone incursion this week, Warsaw confirmed. The groundbreaking development, part of Operation Eastern Sentry, comes after Volodymyr Zelensky branded Russia's breach into Romania an expansion of war. Polish President Karol Nawrocki made the steadfast commitment following Russia's drone incursion on Wednesday, which also prompted NATO to trigger Article 4. And on Saturday, F-16s were scrambled after Putin flew drones into Romanian airspace during another attack on Ukraine. Details of Operation Eastern Sentry are classified, but it will involve a deployment of NATO troops into Polish territory. On Saturday, Romania's defence ministry confirmed a drone had crossed their border after Moscow launched an onslaught on neighbouring Ukraine. War hero Zelensky said the incursion was not a mistake and warned the West that the move was an obvious expansion of the war by Russia. Bucharest scrambled two F-16 late to monitor the situation following the strikes and condemned the breach as a new challenge to Black Sea security. The Defence Ministry said they detected a drone in national airspace and tracked it until it disappeared from the radar near the Romanian village of Chiliavec. NATO acted swiftly after the group vowed to defend every inch of Allied land earlier this week. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas called the Russian action a reckless threat to security. After the Polish incursion...
Kaja Kallas getting in on the act there. I can't believe anybody takes her seriously, but it is nevertheless a serious situation. John Healey, the UK Defence Secretary, has said NATO is responding with unity and strength, and said that Typhoon jets would be ready to attack Russian drones flying over NATO countries if required to do so. Is this story for real, Matt? So is this a false flag? Is this an exaggeration of the threat? This is arguably the most dangerous flashpoints to date.
If we look at the Polish drone, shall I say, happening event, exactly. I'm very skeptical. Looking at the pictures of the down drones, they look more like styrofoam versions of something my children built during summer. And the fact that these were not, they were drones they were observational drones. Also take the fact that some of them were lined with duct tape. I'm not really buying into the fact that they were purposely sent from Russia heading into Poland. Also, there's been some doubts over the fact that the range of these drones don't really match how far into Poland they were if they were to have been sent from Russia. So there are a few different ideas. Either it was spoofing, that means that you could see them tracked, but someone else put them onto the ASI, onto the radar trackers, or perhaps they were kidnapped. I mean, Ukraine has been developing a kind of sentry in order to hijack the drone's signals, kind of lock the signals and then open them up again once the drones are past the target. This was reported on about a year ago. So perhaps this weapon has gone into action in Ukraine. Or the third option is that it was it was actually a false flag in order to gear up the European armament factories to get them to produce more anti-aircraft and anti-drone and anti-missile defenses. Also, it was in order to drum up support within NATO for establishing a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine. Then, of course, the fourth and final hypothesis is that, yes, it was a Russian attack against a NATO country in order to provoke a war with NATO. However, I find that highly unlikely, since Russia has absolutely nothing to gain by involving NATO into this conflict at this time. When it comes to Romania, I can't say for certain what happened there. At least Romania claims that the drone went into Romanian territory and then, like they said, left again, which is very convenient. I should, however, say that I saw just about an hour ago that Romania does not support the establishment of a no-fly zone over Ukraine because they stated that they fear a heightened risk of confrontation with the Russian Federation. Now, this was stated by the Romanian president. So it seems that all Western politicians are not as hell-bent as the Polish, Scandinavian, or Baltic leaders to get their countries involved in hot action against Russia, which I'm very thankful for. I didn't have much hope for the Romanian president, but this latest statement that I have seen him made actually points to the fact that he's a thinking man, and those are, or a thinking person, and those are quite hard to come by these days. But that's actually good news. Even though Russia perhaps breached Romanian airspace, Romania still says a no-fly zone over Ukraine is a bad idea, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, it does seem a bit of an overreaction from NATO. If nothing else, these drones, if indeed they were Russian drones, spent little more than half an hour over Polish airspace before heading off again. So, you know, scrambling fighter jets is an escalation, isn't it? And the rhetoric coming out of Europe, and indeed the UK in particular, always seems to be to escalate rather than de-escalate. Now, Donald Trump, of course, famously said he would end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours of being elected. Here we are 9 months into his second term. And it rages on, you know, every bit as bad as ever. We had the Alaska summit that was heralded as perhaps bringing a breakthrough. Nothing happened, basically because the Russians made it clear that they would not be backing down or ceding any of the territory that they've gained. Here's Trump's latest pronouncement on the subject.
This morning, President Trump putting growing pressure on all NATO nations to stop buying Russian oil. In a post on social media, President Trump saying that NATO's commitment to winning the war has been far less than 100%, and going on to say he believes the Russian-Ukraine war would end if all NATO countries stopped buying oil from Russia and placed tariffs on China of 50 to 100% for its purchases of Russian petroleum.
And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
It comes after months of Trump promising to negotiate an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and even meeting with Putin and Zelensky separately.
I thought this was going to be an easy one for me, but this has turned out to be tough. The hatred between Zelensky and Putin is unfathomable.
The president has faced criticism for repeatedly setting 2-week deadlines for Russia to de-escalate and then allowing them to pass without any consequences. It comes as tensions are running high over the skies of Eastern Europe. Over the weekend, Romania scrambled fighter jets after a Russian drone flew through its airspace, the second incursion over a NATO country in less than a week. Last week, more than a dozen Russian attack drones were shot down after violating Poland's airspace. Trump suggesting this could have been a mistake, but Poland insists it was deliberate. Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill agree and worry Putin is testing the resolve of NATO.
Tom Tillis said he believes Russia is playing the U.S. Do you think President Trump was played, especially at that Alaska summit?
I never had any good faith anticipation of these negotiations. Putin is a KGB once and always, and I don't think he's playing fair. I think he's manipulating the president as a KGB officer would.
Overall, EU dependence on Russian gas has fallen hard since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, from about 45% in 2021 to 13% now. However, there are still a handful of European countries heavily relying on Russian oil.
Indeed, there are, but Russian oil looks like it's now going to be diverted, oil and gas, to China. New pipeline opening up. Our friend and colleague Pelly North Taylor has said that Russia always really, wants to play with the cool guys in the West, but when spurned by them, has no option but to turn to its eastern neighbor. And we saw the demonstration of Chinese power, didn't we, in Beijing the other day? Extraordinary stuff. Europe would be very foolish to take on any kind of Sino-Soviet alliance, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, most certainly would. But Europe are a bit of a self-hating union these days, and don't really act according to what would be proficient for their own economy or our economy. And Ukraine is especially self-hating. You have to remember that Ukraine will, I think they declared today or yesterday that they will restrict imports of Indian diesel from October 1st over concerns that this diesel might contain components of Russian origin. So basically, India supplies around 18% of Ukraine's total imports of fuel. At least it did so in August. But now Ukraine will start testing the diesel coming in from India in order to not to support Russia by buying this oil, which of course, given the situation of Ukraine and the upcoming winter, is going to once again strike quite harshly on Ukraine. Even though Zelensky says it's the right thing to do, I'm not sure that the people who will be going cold and freezing this coming season agree with him. So additional pressure, which Trump is talking about, will be difficult to achieve, because India's finance minister, and his name is Sitaraman, I think. India's finance minister said that India will, and I quote this, undoubtedly be buying Russian oil. So there is no real shift in New Delhi's policies that India's oil purchases will be driven by India's own economic priorities and not external pressure. And in this, India is by far wiser than the EU, who is basically driven by American economic priorities and definitely caving to American external pressure, not giving a damn about the needs of their own EU economies or their own EU citizens. So it's yes, what Trump is doing now is he's once again tying the hands of the obedient European Union countries, and he will thereby gain more income to America.
Very quickly, Mats, before we go, when is NATO going to accept that the war in Ukraine is lost, that the territory Russia holds will not be won back on the battlefield or indeed at the negotiating table, and accept the realpolitik of the situation for what it is?
A very difficult question, and one that will be difficult to answer in short. But I think NATO will accept it once the powers that be in London and Washington realize that no more money can be extracted from the Ukraine conflict. Then they will send out a signal, and NATO will read this signal, and then NATO will say, okay, we're withdrawing. When it comes, I don't know, but that's how it will go down.
Let's hope it comes before World War III. Mats Nilssen joining me live from Stockholm. Thank you very much for your contribution to Ascending Order today. I'm Basil Valentine. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow, 1 p.m. UK time, with a potentially controversial guest, Dr. Rehiana Ali. You'll have to tune in. 1:30, she'll be joining me, and we'll be doing a deep dive into all matters relating to the persecution of health personnel here in the UK for expressing the wrong opinions. Have a great day and see you all tomorrow.